There's all kinds of risks to do with cyber attacks, to do with not having enough skills, making the wrong bets, all that sort of stuff. But the risk that I ended up deciding was the biggest risk, was a strategic risk of not adopting agentic AI quickly and effectively enough. So that is what I focus on.
Welcome to the Implement AI podcast, the podcast where we explore the impact of AI on your business. I'm Piers, Linney, alongside my co-host and co-founder of Implement AI, Dr. Aalok Shukla. We cover the real-world applications and impact of how AI can be practically applied to drive growth and efficiency in your organization. We cut through the jargon to focus on actionable strategies and use cases to highlight the transformational power of AI. Let's dive into today's conversation. I'm Piers.
I'm Aalok.
Right, traveling again. So started in, where have I been? Good grief. I'm worn out. So did a great event with a Manchester Growth Company and PwC's nice offices in Manchester, which is the same building as our lawyers where we did our event. That was really good, actually. Got some good feedback from that. And then I was down in London, then I was in Lisbon, haven't we? So we've actually been together with the whole team, even people that live quite far away, actually. We all got it to Lisbon. We've got an office there now. So it's great to get a team together, isn't it? And the amount of ideas that came out of it.
Of course. When you spend 2 days live with everyone, it's really good.
Yeah, so we're doing like quarterly team events in Lisbon. Also, it gets me out of the weather. So that was quite
Actually,
good.
it's raining today, so you didn't. We timed it perfectly.
I left it about time. And then next week I'm at the British Franchising Association national event. That's going to be interesting. So I think huge opportunity in franchising to use AI just to basically create almost, it's a bit like M&A in a way. You've got the sort of the franchisors to create an AI first model and then distribute that down amongst the franchisees. Huge opportunity there. And also, a couple of things we're going to talk about is we've started a series of webinars. So every Thursday, 11:30, if you go on LinkedIn, you'll find the links. We're going to build a page on the website as well. But if you want to go hear about our AIOS and what we're up to and just learn a bit more about our product, we've got a product now, which we'll talk about a bit later. You can join a webinar. So there's every week now. So just feel free to join. And Alex, it's discovery basically. Alex, who's our marketing growth lead, will take you through that. So we've got an interesting show today. We've got another guest on. So we're going to go through, I did a post last week. Quite a few podcasts are based on some of our posts. And this is covering the 10 layers really that you need to get right between just thinking you can just stand up an AI agent. Okay, people think it's easy. And we'll maybe touch on the dev projects we've come across, which is doomed to failure. And also between that and actually having AI that actually adds value and does something useful. So we're going to go through Alok's post really and talk about these 10 layers. I'll go through them
To
in
have
a
a
minute.
digital worker, like what does it take to have a
Yeah.
digital team, basically?
Yeah. And then we're going to be joined by Simon Torrance. He's actually one of our partners. So if you don't know yet, if you're a technology consultant, you're a small MSP or a big MSP, and you're talking to your clients about AI, but then the question is, well, how do I deploy it? We've got an introducer partner program, which is growing pretty quickly actually. And next year we're building a reseller program. So Simon's one of our partners, and we'll let him introduce himself, but he's got 30 years of experience in strategy, innovation, and he's working with clients to help them sort of implement technology-driven growth strategies, but especially focus on agentic AI. So we'll have Simon on a bit later. So if you don't know us, just make sure you go on the website, sign up to our resource center, lots of resources there. It's all been updated as well. But let's get into it, Aalok. So these are 10 hidden layers that kind of determine whether your AI is going to be a gimmick or something you've stood up because you've been told to by your board or your team, or you think you need to, and creating something which is, is kind of fit to purpose, and it's AI, and especially agentic AI, that actually is going to deliver value. So, and we see this all the time, right? These things don't just come out of thin air. We don't just sit around, just thinking this stuff up. Everything we write about, everything we talk about in this podcast is literally born from experience, sometimes
Real painful experience.
Yeah,
Real.
but it's just like, because we know quite a lot, and then we engage with organizations that, and they know their business clearly better than we do. And when you have that sort of interaction, we learn so much about how to implement this technology. So let me go through the list, and then we'll cover off each one. So first one is capacity architecture. So that's a massive one. Workflow engineering, so agents, humans, agents, that kind of machine-human partnership. Knowledge infrastructure, the integration layers, which can be really complicated. And this is where people think, well, I won't go into it, but we'll come back to it. Quality assurance, that's a big one. People have got concerns about AI. And then monitoring, performance monitoring, reliability engineering, cost optimization across the whole piece, governance frameworks, and then change management, because sometimes you've got to change the way you operate your business to implement this technology. So let's start with the first one. So capacity architecture. So before automation, you got to understand what that actually means to your organization, haven't you? So if you think you're going to increase it, it's kind of measurable.
Exactly. So let's just start there, basically, right? Like you said, Piers, like most businesses think that, like, okay, I've got ChatGPT, I can write a prompt and I see something, okay? Therefore, can it handle my accounts or can it do my sales, basically? And there's a big difference between just an API, some prompts, and actually like somebody who's in your department or running a department by themselves doing the work in that kind of way. So we always say that you've got like, you've got your human team and you've got your org chart for that. But then the first point we're talking about here, capacity architecture, the AI team that would then almost either complement or augment or even replace certain departments in that kind of way, the org chart for the AIs will be different. This is what we call capacity architecture, basically, because the thing is, you need to understand, like, what is the primary focus of that department and that person. So imagine, for example, one job support person's role is like really handling support tickets, answering a few phone calls, looking up systems on the, in the system to see where they're logging in and using the different details. They're like different areas and different jobs, basically. So each of those needs to be designed as a different agent workflow or a digital worker, which is looking after those things so it can be done. So this is what we call capacity architecture, because you need to understand what capacity actually means in your organization. Like each role needs to be in measurable, repeatable units of productive work. So outcomes, documents, emails, phone calls, what it looks like, tickets created, CRM updates, which fields, all that kind of stuff. And this becomes almost like a scaffolding and like the blueprint to assign those agents before. So what happens all the time is like we get someone says, oh, I've been talking about an AI project with somewhere else, and they say I need 4 agents, Bill, Tom, Sue, and James, for example, right? And we look at that and we actually see that actually that's 4 teams, basically. And those teams, each one might have 8 different elements because they still want quality and optimization for each element of the flow. So we need to make sure we've got all those different things in place, basically. So capacity architecture is the first bit, basically, looking and deconstructing what the role is into like what their digital workers are going to do, basically. We go to the second.
Yeah, well, just say on that one is that unless it's you hear it's the old saying, isn't it? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and that's a key part of that. And the next one then is workflow engineering. So what we often see is you've got your workflows, and in the old world, you kind of automated your workflows, and people think about an AI, don't they? But it's not always the case. Sometimes you have to change the workflows.
Exactly. So if anyone says that you can fully automate something or identify something, they haven't really thought through that whole department, basically. Because I'm talking about a department. I'm talking about a digital worker, a co-worker that can run things and do things in your business, basically. As we all know, that like there's 2 things that need to happen. If you have any kind of worker, there needs to be a manager. So who is the person that's overseeing the output of the AI? So straight away, there needs to be a place where the person is able to see the output of what's going on there in that kind of way. And the second thing is there's going to be edge cases. There's going to be people that like need more support, or the process that you've already got doesn't handle that situation or whatever like that. And so there needs to be a clear handoff. So if you don't design in handoff points and escalation parameters, these things don't happen by themselves, basically, right? So what we always find is like you actually have to design a workflow, and we always pretty much have a human in the loop portal as part of our deployments. Basically, what that means is that basically the AI can be doing its thing, you can see it doing its thing, but you can also see when a human might need to like step in or do something, and that's completely normal, because if you're trying to operate at scale and have digital workers doing that, that's really key. So you need to have protocols which define who does what, the human, the agent, the system, and that's where orchestration begins in that kind of way. So these are the things that's designed into our AIOS and those sorts of ways and the approach that we do things.
And we'll come back to we're going to come back to reliability engineering as well. But it's quite rare. It's different with the voice agent because it's real time. But this is real time. It's pretty rare, isn't it, that agents are doing work and something is leaving the building without a human at some point being involved. You're going to see more and more of it over time. So the next one is this is a big one. Is the knowledge infrastructure. So it's about agents. People always say it's all about the data. It is true. Agents they can't do a lot really unless they can access data that's structured, validated, relevant, and updated, and it's the right data.
I'll say it the other way around, actually. Agents can do a lot if they have access to the right data,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
So that's
Okay, yeah.
that's why, like,
You're always positive.
I
Yeah.
am, but that's how we designed our AIOS, right? Like, it's got the central data repository, it's got its agentic CRM, so it can access everything. So what's knowledge infrastructure? Agents, like, if you want to have someone just doing random stuff, like, why do people not hire a university graduate and say, crack on? They train them, right? They actually say, this is how we answer the phone, this is how we do things, this is our policy for this is our policy for that, basically, right? So you have to think of, like, the knowledge infrastructure as almost the training and the guidance for how agents are going to do different work in your business, basically. And the thing is, the world is obviously changing and updating. So, for example, you might have offers on this week in your business, or you might have a new directive that's come out, or you might have a new product you want to promote, or you might have a new change or a seasonal thing. Now, if you don't have those kind of like accessible kind of like repositories which can be updated with that information, your agent is static, basically, right? And that's not useful to anyone. So it's very important to make sure that you've got access to the structured and validated knowledge, which is essentially within the system, which is vectorizing the way that the agent can operate it. And it's also the memory. Now, people think, oh, I'll just put everything in there. That's not good, because what will happen is you'll flood the context window of the agent and it won't be accurate. It'll forget things. It's a bit like basically someone becoming a amnesiac. So you actually want to give only good quality information and remove away the other stuff. So how that's done is part of a process that we guide, basically. But it's very important to understand it's like garbage in, garbage out. You want to have the best information within there. And then the second thing is that every time the agent is communicating or interacting with someone, it's then going to generate that insight. So that needs to be stored so that it can remember, it can act on it. So that's why we've got long and short-term memory in our systems, and it can kind of do things in that way. So you want to think about it in that way, because you need to have that, essentially that foundation, that context engineering, to allow you to make decisions and understand things, and even to go back over time and look for opportunities to improve, basically.
Yeah, but also what people forget, and we've seen this in like the dev projects, we've seen that, we're kind of up against some time when we're sort of bidding for a business, and they haven't got any memory. I find it amazing. They've got no concept or thought about short-term memory, long-term memory, about the kind of exponential growth of the information you're going to use, recording all your phone calls, you're analyzing them. Where's it all going? What are you doing with it? It amazes me.
I'll say one another thing, basically. How do they have identifiers for accounts? Like, in terms of like what is that your data structure? Like, what are you actually remembering? Can one record have multiple attributes? What can it be classified under, and different things like this? See, if you're trying to build something from scratch, you haven't actually thought about all this stuff and how everything passes to each other. You're going to have too many blind alleys, and too many dead ends, basically, and almost like booby traps. So you need to really take this very, very seriously, basically.
And the thing about AI is, unlike humans, is that all knowledge, as it grows exponentially, you collect more and more information, it can be used if it's structured properly. Whereas with humans, you can't access what somebody said on a WhatsApp when you're on a phone call on a WhatsApp 2 years ago, whereas you can with AI agents. Right, next one. So that was knowledge infrastructure. And then the other one, which is something we get asked about a lot, which is the integration layer. So the AOS, you've got different layers. You've got memory, you've got integrations, you've got the agents, obviously. You've got the memory, you've got the integration, you've got sort of task engine. So the integration layer is often how you access existing, existing data. We get asked about a lot, saying, oh, well, can agents be integrated with existing systems and then new systems and then each other? And in our case, humans.
So the answer is yes, but you have to actually go even deeper into this, basically. So to integrate, basically all of our digital workers can actually do real work, which means updating your CRM, doing different information, pulling, invoices, or understanding different things and creating documents, whatever you want. But for it to do that, let's break it down. We've got more than 600 connections, okay? But each connection has potentially more than 80 to 150 possible applications. Let me give an example. Gmail, okay? You've got an API for Gmail, yes? Okay, there's probably about 150 things it can do, right? It could draft an email, it could actually, create an event, it could, like delete something, it could update the name of something, could add something to a thread. If you don't have the right instructions and the right details about how you're actually managing those things, then the agent will get confused and the context memory will be flooded, basically, right? So you actually have to design these things about how it's going to be used within that agent itself, essentially, right? So it's not just a question of like connection staff thing and doing that thing. I'll give a real example. People think that, okay, you connect to a calendar, calendar, read everything within there, and then update it. But if someone's got many different elements in their calendar with very deep descriptions of each event, you can flood the context window and forget all the conversation. So this engineering and integration has to be thought about very, very carefully, because nothing happens by accident, basically.
Yeah, I'll leave that there. And the next one is, and again, another thing about AI is, and we're going to come back to reliability, it's slightly different, isn't it? Is quality assurance, QA, something I'm always bang on about. In Lisbon, everyone got bored of me talking about this. So it's about having those checks and balances, just so you're confident that what you're doing. And now I always say, at the event I'm at as well, is that people tend to compare AI to Nirvana or the Almighty, right? And all magic, yeah. And now that's fair enough, 'cause you want it to be 100% perfect. You want to work towards that, but compare it to the alternative, which is us, and we're pretty infallible. So talk about quality assurance.
So the thing is, what you have to understand is that like quality assurance is very different for each type of agent and each kind of output of different work, basically, right? So the point is that like there's three things here. One thing has to be accurate information and a confidence interval. So, for example, say, okay, I wanted to research and find things. Now, there might be very weak signals on the internet or even false information. Surprise, surprise, there's lies on the internet, basically, right? And so you need to have like a almost like a scoring standard for like the confidence of that piece of data. But then you also have to have protocols to actually validate that piece of data in different ways, basically. Other things in terms of the output, is it holding the right structure? Is it doing things the right way? What if the tool failed, or what if the connection didn't happen? How have you captured that and going back again? Because it sounds wonderful, but I look at those videos where they basically release 1,000 marbles off like a flight of stairs. You just get whole chaos just happening afterwards, basically. So if you don't actually have like clear paths, guardrails, all those different elements within there, you're just going to get a mess, basically.
Performance monitoring. So this is kind of what it's all about, really. It's about the ROI. It's about having, you can have quantity, you can have qualitative metrics as well, but having metrics. And what your article about, productive capacity units versus FTEs, so humans, is about, well, how do you track productivity? So you want to have some way of performance monitoring. I also don't see this built into the development projects.
Yeah, this is actually quite interesting, because this is very important, because like it's about having measurable contributions to business outcomes, like number of support tickets completed, number of customers reactivated, number of appointments booked with our senior sales consultant, whatever it is like that, basically. So the point is to be able to like measure what's the outcome that you're trying to do, or it could be, for example, number of qualified potential leads that can be reached out to from based on research. But the thing is, what we find often with some businesses is like they haven't even thought through what quality looks like, what good looks like, basically. And we have had real examples where they basically said, but the AI is not doing anything which our humans don't do. And we were just reiterating the point that that's correct, right? Because it's doing it without the person needing to do that step, basically, right? But then when there was other elements where they were saying, oh, but this is not correct, or this is like this, that's because they haven't even defined clearly for their own team what the issue is. So when you're actually trying to figure out, is something a good use for an AI agent or not, there's like a framework that we kind of give and recommend to our customers, basically, right? Like, but the key thing here is you need to know what good looks like, and you need to also understand, like, what you're trying to actually get done for the performance. So then you can say, actually, yes, my agent has now done, or my digital worker has now done, 40% of the capacity of my out of hours stuff, or gone in a different way. I mean, I had somebody else, real call, they've got like, hundreds of locations across the UK, and they were saying their team spends so long listening to voicemails. And I was saying, why they even listen to voicemails? Why doesn't the AI just answer the overflow call, transcribe everything, and give the insights directly? So many ways to like improve the performance of the AI and also your people as well.
Next one is reliability. So this is important. And obviously you've got kind of infrastructure as well, but it's also the way the agents work. Because if you think about it, when you have humans, right, they might be tired, they might have a bad day, they might be a bit unreliable now and then, but they're there. So if your technology isn't doing what it should, or it goes down, for example, then you have nothing there. So reliability is going to be really, really important from the infrastructure layer, which it's more reliable these days. But we saw recently AWS went down, didn't it? So, do you have to have, backup systems on different platforms for that? It depends what your agents are doing.
If you just look at different things, like our agents are always connected into different people's systems, doing different things, doing different pieces of work. Now, imagine, for example, the other system goes down. Imagine, let's say, like the CRM system, which we're connecting into, or let's just say some work management system or whatever like that goes down, or let's say their API limit gets overloaded. So let's say the customer didn't have like enough subscription for their API usage with their current provider or whatever like that, and those calls start failing from our agent. there has to be somewhere where that's captured, so you know what wasn't completed and what needs to be complete. Like, these are things that people haven't even thought of, essentially, right? But it happens every day if you're doing hundreds of thousands of executions a single day, basically, right? So the reliability can't be assumed; it has to be engineered, basically, right? So you need to have, like, fallback systems. Like, what happens if OpenA goes down? What's the backup filling for that? What happens if, like, this isn't there working this way? What will you do for that? Which are the edge cases you will handle? Like, you have to understand all those different elements, and the key thing is, like, without having that, it's just, that's not solid.
I think a lot of this is what you mentioned the word there, actually. What we tend to have a lot of experience of are, which, are the edge cases. And the edge cases, it's like cool, it's like support, isn't it? You've got your where's my order? It's quite straightforward. But there are lots of edge cases that a lot of platforms and the way where people are building agentic AI, they just don't deal with. They're just focused on the kind of the average, the middle of the bell curve, really. Next one's cost optimization. So this is really about, and we get asked a lot about cost. So we have, for example, credits instead of this like a variable cost. So I always say that a variable, obviously you need an ROI, but a variable cost is always going to be better than a fixed cost. Assuming it doesn't add up to more than a fixed cost. But humans and teams have lots and lots of fixed costs. AIs don't have to have that. And also, they're only costing something when they're actually working.
Exactly. So this is actually linked to this cost optimization is linked to point number one, capacity architecture, basically, right? Because what you've got is like imagine you've got a team of 10 people in customer support, right? And say you're looking after 4,000 customers a year, basically, right? So, and let's just say it was 40,000 tickets a year, for example, right? So then each person is doing 4,000 tickets a year, basically. So you take their salary, divide it by 4,000 tickets. That's the cost per ticket, basically, right? If you look at AI, for example, its cost per ticket will be in credits, which would be a fraction of the cost. So when we looked at a real example with a recruitment firm, it was £160 in credit cost versus nearly £2,800 worth of payroll cost, because you're just paying for the actual work that's being done. So the point there is you can really optimize the cost and even unlock new opportunities by being really clear on what you're getting. So that gives you that kind of the ability to balance capability and cost per unit. And then, this is where you could have a whole basically an infrastructure cost advantage, where you could basically start saying, you know what, I will offer a lower cost to my customer, I'll offer a higher cost, higher money to my actual, contractor, and it means that I've got a business model advantage because I've got my own virtual BPO center, which I can scale up, and then, I don't need to have a fixed cost of a building and all the people and everything like that.
Governance framework. So, you've now got new decision layers, risk management, RACI, risk matrices. You got to start thinking about that in a slightly different way as well, haven't you? As you start to introduce these agents.
Yeah, so you absolutely have to have this, because what's going to start happening if you've got these decision layers happening, who's approving the action, what was the prompt required for it, what's the rules for deciding different things, and then what are the escalation paths and audit trails so they can do it. So imagine you're reviewing, 100 different CVs. Like, we've been hiring for 2 different roles recently. I use AI as part of my screening to evaluate job fit versus skills, and even for the conversation we have, and everything is scored. Now, if everything's scored objectively, if someone turns around to me, hey, Aalok, why wasn't I hired for this role? I believe I'm the best candidate. I can share, if they wanted to, exactly what their scoring was compared to, and the percentage, range of wherever it is in that kind of way. Because that's going to happen when you start operating at scale. They'll be like, why is this like this? Or this is like this, or whatever like that, basically. You've then got the ability to show the audit log of how it happened. So the thing is, if you can't have that built into your system, and that's like a fundamental element of the iOS, like it's got all those things within there, then, you're flying blind, basically, right? Like, and then if someone changed your system prompt without you knowing it, basically.
And the last one is this the big one is change management, isn't it? It's not about what we often see is people deploy digital workers and they've got a workflow, and then it's kind of almost at the second order. So, oh, hang on a minute. Now we've got so much sort of volume or so much more capacity. We've got to go and change something else. And also then what the human co-workers do or how they do it. So it's not, sometimes you have to start thinking about how you change your business from soup to nuts, but always I think what you should be doing anyway is looking at, well, how do we go from where we are to AI first anyway?
Exactly. You have to train the team to start thinking that way, but then you also have to give them a clear vision that they're going to be brought along that journey. Their department's going to be upskilled. Their department's going to be AI first. Before you hire a new person, think, how could we use AI to do this? Either a digital colleague or, in some kind of custom internal workflow or whatever like this, because that's the way to do it. But the thing is, the key thing here is mindset and upskilling, because if you don't have that in place, also, for example, sometimes the way people do things can be not very, very, very varied, incoherent and unstructured. But when AI is doing it, you want to make it very clean, so that, okay, 40 to 50% of the flow will be handled by AI for these things. Anything beyond these, the people will do, basically. So it's very important to bring people along that journey, because this is all about augmenting departments, basically, right? So, that's quite a lot of stuff there, but we've obviously just shown a few elements there, but there's a lot to kind of think about before you trying to turn on digital workers and stuff like that, basically.
But it's really, really important, as Alex said, you don't sort of go down these sort of blind alleys. We see a lot of different organizations across lots of different sectors, lots of different things. We bump into lots of problems, and we solve them, and that's how we understand this stuff.
Yeah, there's three things you have to think about, right? So one part of it is actually having the actual system connections technology, which is best in class to do that. That's why we've built AIOS with everything from computer use agents to analyst agents to interactive agents from voice and everything like that. Then the data structure, the integrations, that's one thing. That's the tech stack, right? Second thing is obviously what we just talked about, these 10 things. And the third thing that's pretty critical, people that actually can make this happen, right? That's our solutions team, basically, right? So without all those three things, you're going to have challenges, basically, because you're going to fall down.
Welcome, Simon Torrance, to the podcast. We've got more and more guests joining us now. Now, I always get people to introduce themselves. People introduce me at events a lot, and they get it wrong. So, introduce yourself, Simon. Great that you're a partner. It's probably one of the our introducer partners. But give it a bit of your background and your why you've got this expertise in agentic AI.
Yeah, so I've been a advisor to companies for like 20 years now on strategy and innovation. And I've always focused on fundamental business model innovation, the way that firms can change the way they create value and capture value. And I was asked a few years ago to run a think tank by some large financial institutions on AI and the impact on the financial industry. And I got fascinated with AI. I've been focused on other types of technologies in the past, but I hadn't really deep dived into AI until a couple of years ago. And it sort of was an epiphany moment. It sort of opened my mind, particularly when you started to look at really advanced forms of AI, and agentic AI was just starting to be talked about back then. And I got so excited about it, I created a new business called AI Risk. And this is about 18 months ago, 2 years ago.
I always saw when I first saw your company name, I thought, why?
Because some of the financial institutions I was dealing with were insurance companies. And so they're thinking about risk. They're thinking of the risk to their customers from AI, all the risks that that creates, but also the risk to them and the way that they operate. And then you look at all the different types of risks. There's all kinds of risks to do with cyber attacks, to do with not having enough skills, making the wrong bets, all that sort of stuff. But the risk that I ended up deciding was the biggest risk was a strategic risk of not adopting agentic AI quickly and effectively enough. So that is what I focus on. So now all I do now, I help companies, big and small, work out how to exploit agentic AI to change their business model for competitive advantage. And it's a bit like what you do. And it's a fascinating space. It's very early stage still, as you know. But what I've done is I've collected around me people right at the cutting edge, like Implement AI, like other people who have been doing agentic AI, not just talking about it for the last couple of years. There's not many. And we have done some incredible deployments like you have. And we're taking that to traditional companies who are not super tech savvy, helping them to transform with agentic AI.
Actually, you made a point there. You mentioned it, which wasn't actually on our list. So it's number 11, which is it's not just cyber, is it? It's the security, like prompt injection. There are lots of things that people aren't aware of that actually introduce quite a lot of risk to AI systems deployed by people that don't fully understand what they're doing.
Or haven't built those in at foundational levels, basically, right? You can't just add that on top, essentially. So yeah.
And what I find, so I spend a lot of time, particularly at the moment, working with financial institutions, because insurance companies and banks are perhaps the most exposed to AI in terms of automation and augmentation, because their business is pure information. It's pure knowledge work. And AI, as we know, is very, very good at knowledge work, analyzing lots of data. And what I find is, and I don't know if you have the same finding, I'm sure you do. What I find is that most leaders of very significant financial institutions do not appreciate what agentic AI really is and what it could be for them.
I did an event. It was, I won't mention their names, It's an event for one of the very large accounting consultancies, and there's a room full of like FTSE 350 chairs, and we were talking about AI. And what I found was, when I was a little bit provocative about where it's going, about what it can do, as I normally am, but the response, there was a linear correlation between the response to me and their understanding of AI. The ones that never used it were kind of like, AI will never do that. And then there were some people in the room who are very well known in technology who were like, yeah, he's right. So, and it was like, it was really interesting.
Well, exactly. And what I see this tension between the sort of senior commercial executives, particularly, let's just take insurance. It's a sector I'm focusing on a lot at the moment. And insurance is, I mean, it sounds really boring, insurance, but it's fascinating, um, because everybody needs it, but nobody wants it. And there are these, what's called the insurance protection gap. It's the gap between what cover people really need and businesses need and what they actually have. And what why that exists is because the industry has not been able to satisfy that demand because it's too expensive, it's too complicated. But the size of that protection gap is nearly the same size as the whole existing insurance industry today.
It's the untapped opportunity because, like, I mean, like, I was presenting at a financial advisor conference in September, right? Like, and I'd put together as a demonstration, like, how from a single person's name and maybe a company they're involved in, like any property associated with them, their age, their kind of like potential net worth, their calculations, what's going to happen over the next 10 to 15 years based on their current trajectory, what financial products they're going to need and different types, like all that stuff could be kind of like put together. And the thing is, like, if someone's a serious operator, they actually want those things. And if it's brought to them, like, you're missing this thing, you're missing that thing, this kind of, you know, personalization of this experience at scale. We always talk about revenue capacity and experience. This is experience, right? So if you could kind of communicate to particular customers in a particular way, you can massively increase the value you could deliver to them, and it doesn't actually cost more to send that email or to send that SMS, but it's just the messaging in it. It's like the difference between a £50 note and a £10 note is the ink, basically, right?
It's very important because, I mean, if you think about the benefits to society as well, those protection gaps, if something happens, if a natural catastrophe happens or a cyber attack happens or people can't pay for healthcare, who picks up the tab? It's the government. So you've got this opportunity, you've got this, if you like, it's non-consumption, it's unmet demand, which is out there. The industry is unable to satisfy that because it's inefficient and can't work out how to do it. And so the government picks up the tab. So what what I say to that, and that industry, by the way, insurance has just been flat as a percentage of GDP for 20 years. So it just and the executives are remunerated on achieving 3 to 5% growth per annum. If they do that, they're happy, they get their bonus. So I see this bigger opportunity. So if we think about agentic AI, what I see is that many companies see AI, and if they understand agentic AI as an efficiency game, we can do the same with less, and we make more profits that way. That's one way of thinking about it, which is that I would say is the predominant way today. How I see it, and I think you share the same thoughts with me as well, it's a growth game. It's doing more with more. You have your human workers, and then you have a near, uh, multiple times the number of AI workers, and collectively you have the operational capacity to do a lot more to address that non-consumption, that value to society, and in return, create value for your company. And of course, you're creating a growth story where it's not about sort of reducing the size of the workforce necessarily. I think that's the exciting thing, but it's very difficult. And I guess, as you say, Piers, you have the same experience, when you talk to people about this, a lot of them who don't understand what is even possible. And I'd love to come on to some examples that bring it to life in a second. When they haven't seen what is possible, they sort of reject the story. Those who have seen what's possible, can appreciate this and think, let's get on with it.
Yeah, we always say that there's no historic frame of reference. I always use cloud because cloud, you see a server in a room, whirring away with an air conditioning unit, and you understand what it did. So a cloud was that delivered in a slightly different way. AI, you've never seen it before. You've never seen Aalok uses, a call agent make 3,500 phone calls in 3 hours and update the CRM perfectly every single time.
like one person can it takes 60 minutes of their time to make 60 minutes of conversation, assuming they were talking on the phone all the time. But it says the AI could do 60 minutes of conversation in 6 minutes or even 1 minute, basically, or 30 seconds, right? Like, because it could do it in parallel, and that the people can't get around that, basically, right?
It's faster horses against motor cars. That's an analogy. No analogy is perfect.
Yeah, man, go through. Obviously, you're out there doing kind of what we do in some ways, but just go through your experience of where you think the market is, what you're seeing, what you're seeing in the market, the opportunity for AI, and then some of your examples. Bring it to life.
Yeah. So what I do is I do agentic AI strategy and implementation. So people, as we said, people, they don't know what they don't know. They might have heard about this topic, and sometimes really know very little. The IT department is often a bit more savvy because they they listen to what we talk about and so on, but they're not the ones making the strategy decisions and making the investments, of course. So what I do is I help companies, well, leaders understand what agentic AI is about, transforming your business model and creating a new workforce, etc. And crucially, as part of that, I demonstrate and show them things that have worked and are working and can work in the future. So that helps to wake them up, educate them about the art of the possible today. And then they're in a frame of mind of thinking, right, this is quite significant. We need to do a proper plan to work out what to do. Rather than, as you see, a lot of this, we'll do some random testing in pilots here, there, or wherever. And that never gets anywhere. The notion of pilot purgatory. We do lots of these things and that don't get anywhere. I'll give you the examples that I tend to use that wake people up. And this is a case study that we did 18 months ago, and it's still probably, I claim, the most advanced commercial deployment of agentic teams of AI agents working in an unstructured environment to manage a commercial operation
Well, that was 18 months ago.
with tools from 18 months ago. Yeah, this is why it's so interesting. And in fact, I got a call from one of the AI strategy leaders at Google in San Francisco the other day saying, I wrote about this, and he said, I have never seen that. We've got things like it in our lab, but I've never seen a commercial deployment. So let me describe it to you, because this one really wakes people up. And as you say, Piers, sometimes the IT people who they can latch onto this. The commercial people are sort of a rabbits in a headlight, going, "Oh my god, I don't, is this true?" Whatever. But it's a story of a non-insurance. Again, it's an insurance example. It's a non-insurance company that wanted to create an insurance business that was complementary to its core business, well, an affinity service. And that's about growing your business. You've got your existing customers, they buy a particular service. Let's offer them some insurance on top to add extra value and increase our value to them, profits for us. And they tried to hire insurance people to run the operation, but they were in a part of Europe where insurance people didn't want to work. Insurance people are quite expensive, and they just couldn't get them. So the CEO said to my colleague, "Is there a different way of doing this?" My colleague is a serial entrepreneur. He was a chief innovation officer for a large financial institution in his past, and crucially, he had a PhD in artificial intelligence from the 1990s. And he came at it back then at artificial intelligence in a slightly different way than the sort of ML big brain approach to it. He is a expert on what we call artificial life. So it's like trying to replicate some of the more natural biological ways that intelligence operates. And I'll come back to why that's important in a second. So he had a bit of time on his hands, my colleague, and he said, well, okay, let's try an experiment. This is now, with 2 years ago, we started implementing about 18, 20 months ago. And he said, well, let's see if we could create a whole operations team out of AI agents only. And he did that. So they operate now. They have agents that are actuaries, that are customer service reps, that are GDPR experts, process experts, etc., etc. They all operate on Slack. So like we interact on Slack, they interact on Slack, and that means they can interact with the human workers in the human call center on Slack as well. So they can work together. You need a place where that can happen effectively. And what happens is that a ticket comes in, or a problem from a customer, question, what instantly happens is the team, it's a sort of more complex request. The team is formed by a facilitator agent who says, we've got to solve this very quickly. It's like having a meeting, when you're in a company. Got a big problem, get the right people together in the room, discuss it, come up with a solution and make it happen. And that's what they do. And they do it incredibly fast. They also do it incredibly well because we have QA agents who are there monitoring what they do. And we've created this threshold mechanism that the action isn't taken until a certain threshold is reached. Now, underlying all of that, because it's not a structured process and it's quite a complicated, it could be any type of ticket and request. My colleague, through his artificial life background, created a swarm algorithm that manages this. So it's like the way that flocks of birds or ants or other types of human, like as humans, we will have our little brains together. They're quite a big brain, but no one can do everything themselves. So these little brains work together. They discuss it. We've created a mechanism by which they come to a conclusion, and then the action is taken very quickly.
Given the fact it's insurance, it's regulated. Well, how does the regulation interact? And then there must be a human in the loop somewhere.
Yeah. So I'll do human in the loop first, and we'll come on to regulation, and then I'm going to come on to innovation next after that.
Oh, yeah, but human in the loop so the regulator can ring them up. That's the only reason.
So, and initially we had a lot of humans in the loop. So we'd had humans participating in the discussions because the human call center, the human operations system, they know the customers and the market very well. And they would interact with the agents saying, well, you need to remember this. What about this? This is how we do. And then at the end, before the action was taken, a human had to review it. Now, it used to be 70% reviews. Now it's gone down to 30% because the agents are actually really good. We've tested it. They don't make many mistakes, far fewer mistakes than the humans, in fact. I'm just going to stick on this human in the loop bit just for now, come on to regulation. What we found is the human workers, they said, I can't keep up. We can't keep up with these agents because they don't take any breaks. They don't sleep. They keep working all night. I can't keep up. And they work really fast. Could you clone me? Could you create a clone of me such that I can participate in these discussions without actually having to be physically there? So my colleague, he looked at all the interactions of the particular human agents that wanted to participate over their Slack history, their email history, and we created an agent, a digital twin of those humans. And so they now participate as part of the agentic team. They have been turned into an AI agent and participate in that team.
That's quite interesting, Sam, because we're working on something similar because you can clone humans, you can clone customers, and then start to look at them in different ways and ways you couldn't do before. And what's then interesting, what I think is really interesting, we're not quite gone there yet, is once you do that, the agents can start to look how the humans are performing and manage that.
Yeah. So, it's really interesting, the agent dynamics as well, because they are given objectives, and that they don't stop until they achieve that objective. They are very, very forceful. And I'll give you one good example of that. At one stage, we wanted one of the agentic teams to do some innovation on the product, because in insurance, you need to get loss ratios quite low to make profit. And we said to the agent, your task is to reduce loss ratios. How can we do it? Now, they struggled with that to start with. So we thought, well, part of the reason is they don't have actuarial understanding. So we created an actuary bot in 1 week. And an actuary normally has 30 years of experience. School, university, they are trained, 30 years down to 1 week. But this is the important point. It's not because we needed a full human actuary. We just needed actuarial input.
The rules-based thinking.
But you were doing that 18 months ago. So the models weren't as good at maths as they are now.
No, they were crap. So, and all we had to do is just take this actuary bot created in 1 week was just taking information that's on the web. That's all it was. Because of course in the company there was no insurance knowledge. But when you take that bit of knowledge and you combine it with the knowledge and the way of thinking of the other agents, they came up with a number of novel innovations to reduce loss ratios and increase profitability. Now, interestingly, some of them were illegal and unethical.
Look at the screen. It's just generating ideas.
Why we got loss ratios? Got people who make lots of claims. Let's get rid of the people who make the claims. And
It's the paperclip maximizer.
it is exactly that. It's exactly. Or the one about how do we reduce climate change? Kill all the humans. So in this case, this is another really interesting example about how you train the agents as well. So rather than going into the system and re-engineering everybody, all we did about to deal with this unethical or semi-illegal, we just posted a picture of the company values onto the Slack channel and gave them a PDF of the law. That's all it was. So you didn't have to train. You just showed them. This is now comply with this.
I mean, that was one of the things you mentioned earlier, was the guardrails, that you got to be really clear about where are the four corners of the box, because like you just say there, AI will find novel ways to operate outside of them.
Exactly. So what we found is that before action is taken, we'd actually created QA and GDPR and other bots who monitor what's going on. So it's really like in a human meeting. You have a meeting, there'll be someone in the corner of the room thinking about regulation. They may not say anything, but when they need to, they pipe up.
Well, come on to the regulatory aspect then, because we implement AI. We're not trying to create a regulated box or something which is a medical device. We kind of do everything else. So other companies raising billions of pounds doing that. But talk about the regulatory aspects then, because you only need one issue in that kind of agentic waterfall, one hallucination or problem somewhere that's missed, and then the human even misses it on the way out of the building, and you've got a problem.
Yeah, so I think there's two aspects to that. Well, one is obviously putting in place the QA agents that are monitoring things, so you minimize that. I mean, the other thing is, in terms of compliance, the regulator, of course, in insurance and other sectors, they require that they need to know how decisions are made. Now, actually, the great thing about agentic AI is it's all recorded. It's all logged. It's a immutable record and a perfect audit trail. So, the regulator asks for information about how we press a button and send them 5,000 pages.
You've got an input into an AI model. No one really knows how they work.
But this has got a Slack audit trail. Without that, you don't have that, because it's showing the thinking.
Input output, but not always why the output looks like that.
Well, except that on Slack, you see all their discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see all their discussion. It's all there. It's all recorded there, so you can show this is the logic flow and how they got to that answer. It's not. I mean, humans, they get in a room, no one's recording it, and you don't know how things are done.
Which by still as well.
Yeah. So we've managed to, there's lots more to do around this when you get into more complex types of insurance.
That was 18 months ago, right? Right. The technology's moved on. So if you think about the complexity of building solutions like that, which you could do on our platform, but a lot of people would look at that and run a mile. They're kind of like saying they're worried about deploying a voice agent to make phone calls or take phone calls, and that's it, or a knowledge base with a chatbot over it. So you're over here in terms of the complexity on that continuum. But given that's possible, it's even more possible now. And this we could start to wrap this up. But where do you think people are? What do you see as the blockers? Because if what you're saying is doable then, it's much more doable now. Why aren't we seeing more of this?
I mean, it's this a great phrase, isn't it? The future's already here. It's not evenly distributed. That classic phrase, isn't it? So, things that are possible, are just not pervasive at the moment. So, it depends who you're showing that. I mean, that example is very extreme and sophisticated. But if you're speaking to a visionary leader who wants to do something different and get the benefits, then I'm working with a number of companies who say, yeah, I want that tomorrow. Now, and part of the reason is the results of that. I didn't mention that, but that, just going back to that case study, that company saved 2 million euros. They didn't have to hire 15 people. So that's a pretty good saving. They got better NPS scores than their competitors by 25% because the agents respond quicker. That's a big metric as well. They collapsed loss ratios and doubled underwriting profitability. That's a pretty big tick in the box. And finally, human employee satisfaction rose because the company was doing more, they were contributing more. In fact, the people who digital twins were made of, they got a pay rise as a thank you. Yeah. So I can talk about the theory, I can show what's happening. When I show those metrics, those are what people are judged on.
But that's even more my point then. So now you can show the design, you can show what the art of the possible is. And now you've got the metrics, which we were talking about earlier. You can show it's measurable, the productivity, the revenue, the experience. Revenue's up, cost is optimized, capacity's up, the experience is better. So again, why isn't everybody doing this?
Because it takes time. Firstly, they don't know what they don't know. So I literally, I'm just focused on the insurance industry for now, but I'm talking to very senior executives who've never seen that before. I show it to them, and the visionary ones say, I want it. Now what happens? They say, I want it. And then, of course, they get into the organizational treacle. So, the COO says, oh, we're very busy doing other things, or we don't have the resources, we don't have the budget. And then the IT people say, oh, this is very dangerous, and there's all kinds of security issues. So you go through, like this is for sort of bigger companies, you've got that sort of organizational inertia that you have to just sort of, you've just got to break through and be patient and push it on. But what I always say to people is that that's why you need a strategy. You need to show that if we did 10 of those types of deployments, plus a whole stream of much simpler deployments, you want a portfolio, not just the most advanced. Collectively, that is going to deliver X by Y time, and that is why it's worth changing things and activating things now. Unless you do that, then it sounds too difficult, and why bother? Let's do a few tests.
So for what's your saying, we're all in this sort of the business of implementing AI, but just to sort of wrap up then, what's the advice you would give any organization about how to approach implementing and deploying this technology?
So firstly, to understand what agentic AI is and how it works and the different types of it. So that's number one. Secondly, to appreciate and accept this is about changing your operational capacity. You've got your human workforce, you've got your digital workforce. Collectively, you can do more with more. So those two things that's a big, step forward. Just understanding those two key aspects. That's step one. Step two is creating a proper strategy. It doesn't mean it takes months and months of analysis. You can do it in weeks, literally, because we use agents to do the strategy, with companies. Create a strategy hypothesis that demonstrates what we could achieve. And then, like good entrepreneurs, you need to test and iterate. So test and iterate fast, but within a strategic framework, not in a random, unstructured way. So that's what I tend to suggest to people, rather than diving in with pilots and tests and so on. And that's the way of doing it properly, if we believe that agentic AI is about delivering superior commercial performance over the next 3 years, which is how I tend to position it.
And what's your one line then, so we can make a nice, neat short for to promo the podcast? What's your one line in terms of, what AI means and the power of it?
I'd say superior commercial performance.
That was fascinating. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk offline again about various leads and ideas we've got as well, especially in the insurance sector. But thanks for joining us, and thanks for sharing that.
Pleasure. No, really good to see you. Yeah.
Thank you. Cheers.
Well, that's it for this week. We've kept it just under an hour, I think, just about. Great talk with Simon. He's one of our partners. So if you're interested, if you're like Simon, a consultant, you're in strategy, you're building even managed services, and there will be solutions that you can deploy on our platform, work with us. So if you're interested, go to implementai.io/partners, and you can download the partner document there. Do register and access our resource center, writing more documents over time. And if you're interested, join Alex on our webinars Thursday 11:30. Details are going to be on LinkedIn, and you can learn all about the AOS. So that's it for this week. We've not doing much traveling over the next week. We're coming up to Christmas. We're now working hard on deploying customers on our platform now, which is a really exciting time for us. Thanks for joining.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Implement AI podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how we can assist you and your business in leveraging AI for growth and efficiency, visit our website at implementai.io. Don't forget to subscribe to the Implement AI podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to stay updated on future episodes. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.